Testing, 1, 2, 3. How are we doing? Any good? Yeah, keep talking. Good morning. Yeah, hi, we're good? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. So, as you will probably know, this morning we're going to look at the whole thing of assisted dying, which is a live issue in our Parliament at the moment, thanks to an MP called Kim Ledbetter, who, interestingly enough, is the sister of Joe Cox, the MP who was murdered by the extremists a number of years ago. Sorry?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Is that better? Any good? No? Okay.
Can you put the mic a little bit closer? Up to the jump.
It is switched on, just to answer the obvious question. I know there's people sitting there thinking he hasn't switched it on. Is that better?
Just a bit more.
Keep talking.
The lady with the hearing aids in.
I've got hearing aids myself. I'm sorry Mark Woodgee is not here, because I could remind him that today Liverpool are going to be presented with the Premier League trophy title. But if any of you have contact with Mark this week, just let him know he wasn't here to hear me say that. Okay? Is that any better? Can you hear me at the back? Right, I think we're there, guys. Thank you. Okay. I did pull Mark's leg a bit last week because I don't know whether you've noticed it, but he loves to use the word friends. Have you noticed that? We need to realise friends. See? And he said it 10 times last week, and I told him he said it 10 times. And one Sunday, I just want to tuck myself in at the back somewhere, and when he says friends, I just want to say, I'm not your friend. Somebody want to try it, just to see what he says. Right. Okay, so should we put our title slide up, Ali, please? Thank you. So this is our subject for this Sunday. I'd like to talk and then open up and have a bit of interaction, because I don't think this is the kind of subject where somebody can just issue you with information for you all to sit there like nodding dogs in the back of a car and then for us to have a cup of coffee, okay? This is a serious, serious subject. And as I've dug into it, and in my professional world that I live in, where I'm surrounded by death all the time, this comes up a lot. Okay, I'll give you some insight of that as we go on. Before I ask Ali to display the next image, I want to say that it isn't directly linked to what I want to talk about this morning. It's going to be linked to another one of these big discussion sessions that's coming down the line. It's provocative. I don't apologise for showing you the picture that's going to come up now, and I invite you to think about its implications going forward. So, Ali. Those two pictures are of children in Gaza taken in the last 36, 48 hours. Assisted dying, it appears to be what the Israeli government are doing at the moment. Can you imagine a situation where the whole population of Devon is systematically herded by violence, bombs, bullets, the houses being blown to bits, deprivation of food and medical supplies, herded all the way down to Plymouth? And once we get to Plymouth, all the aid stops altogether, and the only thing we can do is go over the border into Cornwall, where there'll be some kind of relief and sustenance for us. What I've just described to you is what's happening in Gaza now. The Israeli army are bombing and blowing people to bits, and some of them are our brothers and sisters in Christ, by the way, killing them. Genocide on the news, Where's the voice of the church? Oh, we must pray for Israel. What even does that mean? What even does that mean when we're watching genocide on the television? And we're going to pray for Israel. We're going to stand with Israel. What even does that mean? Now, we're not going there this morning. But I've opened it up deliberately. Because there's a form of assisted dying going on right now in Gaza. People are being assisted in their deaths when they don't want to be. And somewhere the church has got to find a voice to talk about that. And not blitheringly just say, oh, we've got to stand with Israel. And when we talk about that, I'll unpack it further. And some of you will agree with my perspective, and some of you won't. And we'll all be Christians together. Okay? Right, let's move on. Thanks, Hyde. Okay, so these are some words from a brother who's no longer with us, a theologian who had a massive impact on my life, a man called John Stott, who many of you may have heard of. And John Stott just put a briefing paper together around this whole thing. And this really sort of sets out the standard Christian position on assisted dying euthanasia. There's a difference between assisted dying and euthanasia, as we'll get to. So what does he say? Well, human life bears God's image. It's not for us to terminate. According to the Christian worldview, we're part of community. We're joined to each other. We're not autonomous. The decisions we make impact other people. Let me illustrate that to you. Heard this in America in 1986. I've never forgot it. Pastor Wayne Benson. I've shared it here previously with some of you. If you can imagine, we all get in a pleasure boat and we go out into Tor Bay. And this boat has rows of seats and we're all sitting in our rows enjoying a beautiful day. And as we look, Dave Barnett, who's been behaving quite strangely, just for a change, gets out of his pocket one of those little hand drill things, and he goes down between his seat and he starts drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Never.
Now, what would our reaction be if Dave started to do that? Oh, look at dear old Dave, you know, nothing to do with us, just his life, sitting there, drilling holes in the bottom of the boat. After a while, the water's coming in. What are we going to do? Well, we're not going to be indifferent to Dave's actions, are we? The point being, it illustrates point 2 really well. We're community. What other people do affects us, whether we recognise it or not. And at a blindingly obvious level, when a government passes a law, it affects us. Because then we've got to make a decision. Do we go with that law, or do we rebel against it? Okay. If the law was changed, there'd be a great risk that people would feel pressured into accessing assisted suicide or euthanasia. At present, if you're a burden on your family and the state, you've got a sensitive conscience, you don't need to feel guilty about being a burden in the sense there's nothing you can do about it. That's where we are right now. Let's just go again, Ali, please, if we can. So if assisted dying became available, there would be a mechanism sanctified with legal approval that you could feel yourself to be a burden. Rather than liberalising the law on assisted dying, we should invest more time in palliative care. At present, the level of provision remains inconsistent due to lack of funding. Okay. So I think, from a Christian perspective, we'd all kind of say, yeah, that's how we understand things. That's where we are. Yeah. A couple of scriptures to back it up. Genesis 1:26, let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness. And of course, Psalm 139. This one came home very, very strongly to me last year when I went through a bizarre experience of suffering some delayed grief from the death of a friend who died in 1996. Get that? Yeah. So, you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That last couple of lines there, all your days, all the days ordained for me were written in your book. There's huge implications to that. There really are. And they become a bit more complicated with modern day technology, as I'll try to infer to you. So one of the big arguments against the legislation that Kim Ledbetter is trying to introduce is that it's a slippery slope. It's the beginning, and we don't know where it will end. I think there's substance to that. Let me tell you a little bit about abortion. So, in our country, there was a major piece of abortion legislation passed in 1967, headed up by David Steele. Subsequently became Lord Steele, and of course he's died now. And in the following year, 1968, there were just under 24,000 abortions in the United Kingdom in 1968, which is about 3 every hour. Okay. Flip on to 2024. How many abortions do you think there were in 2024 in the United Kingdom? 24,000 in 1968. And the legislation was brought in, we're only going to use these in absolute necessity circumstances. We want to do away with backstreet abortion. This is about protecting women. So we've gone from 24,000, 3 an hour in 1968. How many do you think there were last year? 300,000. So we've gone from 3 abortions an hour, 1 every 20 minutes, to 30 abortions an hour, 1 every 2 minutes. That's where we are. Now those statistics are not out the air. That's where we are. So you see, when something comes into law, the impact of a change of law is that it starts to change people's mentality and mindset. And what used to be regarded as a difficult thing is suddenly a really easy thing. Now, I'm not standing here condemning anybody who's had an abortion. But we've gone a long way in 1968 to where we are now. We're not in a place anymore where we're just, doing this in extreme circumstances to save people's lives or whatever. I remember listening to a debate on BBC Radio. It was a number of years ago now, but I clearly remember where I was because I had to pull my car over because I was so shocked and saddened by what I heard. But it was probably around the time when David Alton, the Liberal peer, was arguing. David's a Catholic, and he was arguing to bring the thing down from 28 weeks to 24, which actually got passed. Best he could do. And a lady rang in to basically say that she was going to have an abortion because her doctor told her that she'd have to cancel her skiing holiday because she couldn't ski while being pregnant. So she gets an abortion so she can go on her skiing holiday. Now, to be fair to David Steele, there's no way that the legislation that he drove through was ever meant to justify that kind of behaviour. But you see, that's where we get to. Once you open the door, once you start sliding down the slope, who knows where it's going to go? Okay, so I'm kind of preaching to convert you that, I know, but there we are. Okay, So what about the Christian voice that's in favour of assisted dying? Because it's out there. It's out there. How do we respond to that? So, in my professional life as a funeral celebrant, I've sat with over 2,000 families now over 9 years. And some of them are absolutely harrowing, the things that you hear. And I remember one lady said to me, she said, professionally I use my full name, she said, Robert, I would not allow my dog to go through what I saw happen to my husband. She said, I wouldn't put my dog through. She said, the difference is I can put my dog down, but if I put my husband down, I'll go to prison. See, when people say that stuff to us, we can't just retreat to our Christian tower and announce the Bible to people, because it's just meaningless and rude and all kinds of other things as well. We've got to have a way of engagement. The lady said, I remember my father in his last days saying he had never imagined there could be so many different varieties of pain. You see, brothers and sisters, some people don't die a good death. Some people die a really bad death. They just do. Some Christians do as well. So, the arguments coming the other way come from the teaching of Jesus, interestingly. So a Christian case for supporting assisted dying is based on Jesus' teaching that the whole of the religious law and prophetic teaching can be summarised as requiring us to love God and our neighbour as we love ourselves. Jesus' golden rule was that we should always treat others as we wish to be treated ourselves. That golden rule is in many religions, by the way. Applying this to assisted dying, the argument is simple. When people's sufferings are so great that they make repeated requests to die, it seems a denial of that loving compassion which is supposed to be the hallmark of Christianity, to refuse their request. Because if we truly love our neighbours as ourselves, how can we deny them the death that we would wish for ourselves in such a condition? Selah. Now think on that. As a Christian theologian who's put that forward, someone who loves Jesus, they said, well, there it is. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Somebody's got, whatever they've got, and they're crying out, but just let me die. If you don't grant them their request, you are not doing to them that you would want done to you. You're breaking the golden law of Jesus' teaching. How do we respond to that? This is where I stop talking for a little while. Anybody want to? Or who's that?
I've had this conversation with Peter.
Mm-hmm.
He has asked me if I would like it
Yeah.
to slip away. And I said, I will give you all the medication that I would legally be able to give you to take away the pain. But I can't kill you because I have to live with that. And you're the person that I love. And I couldn't kill you. And it would kill me.
Only God has the right to take a life, we do not. As Christians, We serve a God. And where there's life, there's always hope. And the miracles even. We don't have that right to end life. Only God has.
Right, now I agree with you, Graham. So what I'm going to say in a moment should not be seen as me disagreeing with you and everybody getting worried about me, okay? Because I'm
That
with
was
you.
my view.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Dave?
Guy I work with, he was watching his mother pass away in hospital, and had a lovely conversation with him about it. But his mother was being kept alive in hospital, and she had a quiet word with him. Said, "I want to go." He had a quiet word with the doctors. The doctors withdrew the medication, and she went. That for me seems right,
Yes.
and there didn't need to be any law for that to happen.
Right. Okay. Which is going to factor now into some words I'm going to say here. And Graham just picking up on what you've just said, on which I am in full agreement with you. So, God and the hour of our death. Ange, do you want to comment and I'll respond?
We can't hear you, sorry, you need a microphone?
Right. Paul, can you bring the mic to Ange, please? Hang on, Ange. No, just, it's better if it's on the mic, actually. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to say that statement that you made, do to others what you want them to do for yourself.
Well, Jesus made that
Yes,
statement,
yes,
yeah.
yes, but I'm talking about that statement is what I mean. So if you look at it from the other way around though, if the person asked you to push them off their head, would you do that? You know, that's not a very good example, but what I'm trying to say is the issue is the perspective of the person who is being asked to do it, because if they've not have got a very good standing from either a Christian point of view, a moral point of view, or whatever, what they might want to do to them is not necessarily good, is it?
No, but then if we're being asked to do something that we don't believe is ethical,
Yeah,
like push someone off very head,
yeah, that's a silly example,
whatever
just to
it
make
is,
a point.
we've got a choice to make. But if we're being asked to do something that is being argued as could be unethical, okay, i.e. putting someone out of their misery that someone wouldn't allow their dog to go through, there's a different ethical question there, I think. Okay.
People will talk about dogs, and I know that people love their dogs, but a dog has no soul or spirit, however clever they may be, however good companions they may be. A dog is not a human, and that's what people always say about that. They don't think, well, a dog's a dog, you wouldn't let it suffer. A human is a human, with a whole other...
But now, Ange, now we're talking with inside a Christian worldview. Yeah.
Yes.
And we're trying to deconstruct from within inside a Christian worldview what's not inside a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So when a lady says, who, I don't know what her faith in God level was, it wasn't for me to find out. But when she says, I wouldn't have let my dog go through what I saw my husband go through, that's a cry of the heart. She's making an incredibly deep statement when she says that. She was clearly distressed by her husband's death and felt that she should have had the right to help him to end it, clearly.
In the same way that you would a dog, who has no soul, no spirit.
Absolutely, but she doesn't get that. She's not interested in that, on souls, spirits, dogs, humans. You know.
Can I make another point?
No, Daphne, I want to respond, and then, or else we're just going to drift away, okay? So, so Dave, really interesting, the point you just made about the withdrawal of medication and she died, yeah. It actually goes a bit further than that in what we've got in law at the moment, and I'll talk to you about my father's death. My dad died on Valentine's Day 2016, 2 months short of his 92nd birthday. The circumstances of his death were that he had a really bad fall, and it knocked him up, and he just wasn't coming back from it. And it got to the point where the place where he was, the lady who owned it, she was I liked her a lot. And she just said, look, we don't think Sam's coming back from this. And do you want us to give him end-of-life medication? And that's what they call it, end-of-life medication. Which what it meant is once they'd infused this into him, he would go to sleep and not wake up. And he'd go to sleep, and any pain or discomfort that he was feeling from the physical injuries that he had, if I just say to you, my uncle then said to Dad, as his brother-in-law says, Stan, you look like you've gone 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. So you can imagine what my dad looked like. He looked like a 91-year-old man who'd been beaten up by Mike Tyson. So Dad, was in pain, distress, whatever. And as a family, we said he's not going to come back from this, so go ahead with the end-of-life medication. And they did, and within about 36 hours, Dad had left this life and gone to be with Jesus. Now, there's a sense in which you could say, well, wasn't that assisted dying? Yeah, it was. And that's legal already in the country. We didn't break the law and agreeing to that. And the lady who offered it to us wasn't breaking the law and offering it to us. Now that's already law in our country, that can be done. And we opted for it. And you may think, oh, I'm not sure you should have done that. Well, that's fine, that's what we did. And if you do think that, that's not a conversation I want or need to have with you, okay? Just in case you were going to grab me over coffee at the end. We're not doing that, okay? So that's legal already. A little bit different, Dave, from what you said, but it speaks to the point I want to make now. So this is from a Christian theologian who is arguing that assisted death does have a place. And he says this: God and the hour of our death. Some argue that only God should decide the hour of our death. But we need to be consistent. If we truly believe that only God should determine the hour of our death, then we should think it as wrong to use medical means to extend life as it is to shorten it. In past ages, many Christians held precisely that view. Today, if a person's heart stops, we assume the hospital would normally attempt resuscitation, even though for most of human history, the time when the heart stopped was seen as the time God had chosen to end that person's life. So you see, brothers and sisters, when you start to drill into this, the ethical implications are not as simple as what you and me believe, Graham. If we think it's wrong to shorten life, why do we think it's right to lengthen life? Why do we? Because if God has shown up and said it's your time now, inject, do whatever we need to do, bring them back. Why are we okay with that, and we're not okay at the other end? Anybody want to comment on that?
Can I raise a point on that?
Go on, Graham. Paul, can Graham have the mic, please?
I've probably got a loud enough voice.
Well, we'll have you for the recording, Graham, as well. Go on.
Have you thought of the possibility that God's will, if the hospital managed to get them back to life, then it wasn't God's timing and will, because they succeeded in bringing them back to life?
Yeah. That's a perspective. Yeah.
Can I have the mic, please?
We're going to come round. Sharon, then Carol, and then Julie. Right, we're going to go in that order, and then Paul. Okay, Sharon?
So, my father's in a care home, and we had to have this discussion about if my father becomes ill, if anything should happen, do we want them to resuscitate him, basically? And it really was quite, oh my gosh, I had to sit there for quite a while. I've worked in care. I worked at the Torquay Hospital for 5.5 years, and I was PA to the chief nurse and the medical director, and I learnt a lot whilst I served under them. And the chief nurse was in charge of end-of-life care, and I used to minute those meetings. So I'm very thankful that I was able to really reflect on my time and about end of life. What I want to say is that, and what I said to the people at the home was, right now I can't instruct you whether you resuscitate my father or not. It's purely going to be about the circumstances. And I fully believe that, I think, you know, as we were saying about when Grandpa, with his situation, I think we are guided by the doctors and the medics. And we have to just look at, well, where are they now? What are they experiencing? What is going on in their body? And it's making that informed decision, isn't it? It's all about informed decisions. And I think the do not resuscitate, when you go into hospital now, if it's very serious, very quickly, from my knowledge, when I worked there, they get families to be signing if this person's, heart starts to, do you want them? So I think it's all about consent, isn't it, as well? It's a massive subject. We could talk about it all day, couldn't we? But it is all about the circumstances, isn't it?
Okay, Carol?
I know we've got the DNR issue with people, which I encountered through Nick's illness.
Of course. DNR being do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate,
Yeah.
which he chose to have DNR on his report.
Yes.
And he didn't have to have the end-of-life package, although we had it.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's, yes, God knows the number of our days, but medicine is so far advanced. There has to be a stage at which we as individuals or families involved, there has to be a point where we don't intervene, because, we can do anything now, can't we, really?
Almost.
I mean, for, medical intervention I'm talking about.
Yes.
We can operate for this, we can operate for that.
Yes.
But we already have, at the end of the day, a decision for who, if I'm ill, not everybody's able to make that decision, I know, depending on circumstances.
Yeah.
But I know my older brother had terminal cancer, and he opted not to have treatment.
Right.
There has to be a point where we're not sort of coerced into having more treatment and more, especially when it involves surgery and everything like that, where we have to draw a line.
Now,
And that's not an
obviously,
easy decision to make, obviously, and it's very individual. But are we at this stage almost, although we've talked about DNA, etc., at the end of the day it's our decision, but we're almost at the stage where surgery and medicine has advanced so greatly, Well, we're talking about dogs. There's a programme on the TV, isn't there, where dogs are having surgery that, you know, you could do on humans. There has to be a point for humans, I think, when we don't.
But there's an important distinction, Carol, is what you're saying, I think, is that we in our own right can say, no, I don't want
Yes.
that.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
But that's quite different to then putting the onus on someone else to kill you,
Yeah,
to end your life,
obviously, yeah. But what I'm saying is, I think some people are still coerced
yes.
into prolonging a life that's not almost unbearable.
Now that's a different concept of coercion, isn't it? Yeah, people feeling coerced into staying,
Yeah,
as opposed to going.
but I know it's not, that's it's a whole new
Yeah,
subject.
yeah.
In there, isn't it?
But it's coercion in another way. Yeah. Right, let's bring the mic over. Paul, please. And then Paul, you'd like to come next? Yep. Right.
Yes, I've had quite, like probably many of you, experiences in death and life and taking great care of our loved ones. Like a domino effect, all my family went down, one after the other after the other. I've got my husband terminally ill. He'd gone into alcoholism. It was a genetic disease. And it was very, very sad to see him. He was a young man, he was 47 when he lost his life. He was quite ill for a while. I watched it happen. He lost his career because of it, 25-year career. I had to be strong. I knew this was coming. I knew that's why I married and committed my love to my dear husband. He was a great man. He was a hard-working career man. And he gave me, everything. So what happened in the end when he was finally taken into hospital for the final time, the 13th of February 2019, I knew that he was a dying man and that he wasn't going to come out of hospital. But he didn't, miraculously he didn't. He was taking it quite in his stride. I watched all his organs break down to the point where his urine looked like Lucasade, which I had to take to the doctor. I had to con him to get him back in to the doctor because he'd already signed. It was a bit of a long, drawn-out process, but coming to the end, when I finally admitted him, I knew he was dying at this stage and that this was his final. He just took it casual, so I treated it casual. We never spoke about it. He wasn't in any pain, miraculously. He didn't even know he was an alcoholic. He just thought he enjoyed a drink, miraculously. The doctor said to me, I was his wife. I was taking great care of him for rather a long time. The house became like a hospital again. They were taking great care of him. I couldn't stop him in his cravings, but what I could do was make sure that I was there to hold him up. And I did, with great pride and great honour. It was certainly an honour. But when the doctors turned around to me and said, because we were taking it casual and there was no suffering, there was no initial pain, which was great for me.
Yeah.
And the doctors couldn't believe it because all of his organs were breaking down, every single one of them.
Were they controlling the pain with medication?
Absolutely no medication.
Wow.
Me personally, I think his body was so alcoholic-fied, it had probably numbed him. But everything was happening at this stage, so he was shifted from one department to another department. And the doctors just looked at me a bit bamboozled because It was just me dealing with it. I've got my mum-in-law in dementia, vascular dementia, so I've got all that going on in the background. I had to be the strongest I could possibly be. And I know I was being guided. I know where that strength was coming from, for sure. And I also had an angel visit me in the hospital. A beautiful, beautiful angel. The doctor said to me, "You do realise your husband is dying." I said, "I've been nursing my husband for a long time." So he was put on life support machine in the end. I was never going to see his beautiful big eyes open again. And I knew when I saw him on the life support machine, it was like looking at him being in his final resting place.
Sure.
It was graceful, it was peaceful, and it certainly was a blessing.
And did you have to make a decision for them to switch that off, or did he just die?
Well, you know, I had no decision. It went from the 13th of February to the 27th of February.
2
And
weeks.
for me, before they took him off the life support machine,
Okay.
which I watched them do.
Yeah.
Now, these life support machines aren't cheap. I've never seen how it was a life support machine, how it all worked, but they don't wash it and sterilise it for using again. It all gets taken away out of the body and straight into the bin. And I made sure I sat there and watched that happen. People couldn't believe it, because I don't think many, it's the way you react. Everybody's got their own individual reaction to death.
Sure.
And terminally ill.
So I need Paul to. Was there a final point you wanted to make before we listen to Paul?
Pardon?
Do you want to make a final point before giving the mic to Paul?
Sorry. Well, the final point is, like I say, with everything, it's money, it's circumstances. But for rather a long time now, I have seen people die, and they've been given the last drop.
Yep.
Because the suffering and the last breath. So.
Yeah, and that's within the confines of the law as we
My
have it
mother
now,
had
of
it.
course.
My mother
Yeah.
had it because she couldn't go any further.
Okay.
So this has been going on for years, years and years, and it's the Lord's blessing. It's the suffering. It's the suffering.
Okay. Hand over to Paul if you would. Thank you, Paul. Paul and then Sue.
The interesting thing is we did have to make a choice to switch off my mother's life insurance. Doctor said she was brain dead following an accident, and we had the weekend to decide should we or shouldn't we. And we prayed and said, God, if you want her to live, we can switch the machine off and she will live. But it's her time, she will die. And we turned the machine off, or they did, and within about half hour, all around her, she died. But one of the points I do want to say is that there were times Jesus raised people from the dead. We've seen some miracles have happened where, in settings, Christians have raised people from the dead. So it seemed to me that wasn't God's ultimate. There were some times when people died, for me, maybe prematurely. Otherwise, why would Jesus have raised them to the dead? Why do Christians today, do hear of the miracles? So why would that happen? So, to me, there's a bit of a niffy area there about, well, you've died, that must be God's will. But the other thing I say, the great danger for me is, if you take Canada as an example, once you're on the stairway, they're now talking about euthanasia or sisters of children. They're talking about the mentally disturbed. They're talking even people who can't get a house. Now, it could be almost a valid reason, or you've not got enough money, or you're homeless. And when you get to those lengths, life is about putting you in the rubbish bin.
Sure.
And the great danger for me, at the other end of the scale, they now want to bring in another bill that you can abort a baby up till birth.
Yeah.
You know, in life, beginning and end. No wonder, you know, people treat life cheaply. It can be disposed of so easily.
Thanks, Paul. Sue, final comment.
Yeah, I was in that situation with Pete, my husband, having to make that decision, ending his life. He wasn't in pain or anything, he wasn't in pain. And obviously he was on a life machine because he couldn't breathe without the oxygen. And the worst part about it was because he was lucid. And the only options were, and you kind of like believe what the doctors say, because I'm not medical, you know. And you know that we could give him a tracheostomy, but then he may only live for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And if we carried on like this, he'd have no mobility and he'd be incontinent. And you know, so you kind of like saying to yourself, well, is this how he would like to live the rest of his life? Because no one had always been so active. You know, how would you cope? And I find the worst, I mean, perhaps if you had been unconscious, because it did say to the doctors, do you have to bring him round? Do you have to bring him out of the coma just to tell him that basically you really haven't got any options? We will have to end your life. And I know it's all different situations, but that was the thing for me. Like Paul said, raising from people, people from the dead, like we know it has happened. And you're waiting for a miracle, thinking, oh, I wonder, keep praying that you will be healed and this won't happen. And that was, that was the worst part of me, having to make this decision and say, with Pete's consent, even though he wasn't ready for going. He wasn't ready for going, but it was that decision that really stayed with me. So, I just find it very, very difficult. I can understand with some people, perhaps the pain they're in. I'm working in a care home as well, and for myself seeing that, sometimes I used to think, well, if they stopped giving the medication, perhaps they would just die naturally. So I just think it's a whole of a controversial situation, this conversation. It is so huge.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you everybody for your contribution. What is clear is that life means something. People are talking about making difficult decisions. These decisions are difficult because we're not putting ourselves down. We're referring to people who do have a spirit, soul and body, who are made in God's image, and there are multiplicitous questions that come out of this. It's here, your eyes saw my unformed body, the days being written in your book. Obviously, when that was penned, God's well aware and inspiring that to David, that he could see through the corridors of time to the point that Graham made, that medicine's going to improve. It's going to be possible to keep people alive for longer. So I'm not making a point that if somebody has a heart attack, we shouldn't resuscitate them. I'm not making that point, so don't take that as a takeaway. Okay? We're very thankful for medical science. But when medical science starts to say, instead of preserving your life, we're going to take it, we're crossing a very, very big line. And it would mean that for the first time in the history of our country, doctors' emphasis shifts from caring for people to potentially killing people. Right? Can't go there. Can't go there.
For years we've had that kind of thing, though, haven't we? We had Dr. Shipman and we had people like that.
But he was breaking the law.
Of course, it's breaking the law.
Breaking the law. Once you, if you can imagine a world where Harold Shipman didn't have to go to prison, that he's held up as a paragon of virtue. No way.
But
no way.
I still feel that we're very, very lucky to still have the diplomacy here. When, like you say, you've just shown photographs of the starving in Gaza. I mean, that's absolutely you know, we ought to embrace that and take that in, you know, as a lesson for us, for what they're going through, exodus and exile. I mean, that is assisted dying on a massive scale. We're still very, very fortunate in this country to at least have a say. If we've got to say that's something, these people are addicted.
Well, they have no say at all. They don't have any say at all. Which is the ironic point I'm making. And while we're watching genocide on the TV, the vast majority of Christians are saying we've got to stand with Israel while they're watching genocide on the television. That is bonkers. I'm going to draw a line. I have to. It's 12:10. Continue to chat over coffee. Sarah, let's sing a song to close, if you can, please.